Hello and welcome to Unify's webinar on Composer Notes, converting Lotus Notes Applications to .NET. This is your host, Matt Brunquell, and I also have with me today Suresh Kumar, who I'll be introducing in a little bit for the demo portion. But before we get started, just to go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, this WebEx panel that you have in front of you, you do have the ability to ask questions or to chat, and if you can, we'd like to have you post your questions on the Q&A. That's the button with the question mark, and as opposed to the chat, just because it gives us one area for Suresh and I to look to make sure we cover all the questions. And feel free to post them during the course of the WebEx today, and more than likely we'll address them during the Q&A session after the demo. For those of you that are new to Unify, just so you know who we are that's hosting the webinar today, we're a publicly traded software company. We've been in business for over 32 years, and we're known for being the first to deliver a relational database in the Unix environment. But since then, we've expanded into development tools geared towards the business application developer. We have modernization solutions, this Composer Notes being one of those that you'll see featured today, as well as we've expanded into archiving and e-discovery. But today we're going to focus on one of our modernization solutions, which is the Composer Notes for taking Lotus Notes Applications to .NET. Now for the agenda, what we're going to do is we're going to start with just an overview of the different types of notes applications that are out there. For those of you on notes, you know there can be quite a wide spectrum, and it's important to start with this background just so you know what the different types are, and this will be key in understanding where the distinction of the demo you're seeing today, the distinction of the tool in terms of where its strength is for converting Lotus Notes applications. And then we'll give you some context about the Composer Notes solution we're demoing to you today, as well as the methodology behind doing migrations with it. And we'll do all of this in about 15 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and go into a demo where I'll have Suresh demo the migration of a notes application over into ASP.NET, and then we'll have that Q&A session. So with that, going into the different types of notes applications out there, first of all, we see on a spectrum we would put on the x-axis data-centric applications to process-centric applications out there in notes. So these range from very simple applications where notes is just a container and really it's data that's in there, like a discussion database, to more workflow-oriented applications where there's events that will trigger certain business logic. Notes is the front end. They may be connected to other systems. And then on the y-axis to this, we also have template-based applications in Lotus Notes to custom design applications out there. Now, when you map these together, this X and Y axis, you end up with 4 categories or quadrants, as we use in the title, of notes applications. And this quadrant 1 through 4 run along these spectrums from very simple to very complex custom notes applications. And the solution you're going to see today is really geared towards that quadrant 4, the custom notes applications. For those of you that have already made the move into other messaging and email platforms like Microsoft's Office and SharePoint, you know that there are actually alternatives to the very simple or template-based applications available to you. But for the quadrant 4 applications, or the more complex custom ones, those are the ones that require some kind of solution that's just not available out there in a template. And the key factors to these quadrant 4 applications are Typically, there is significant business logic, so that would be notes applications that are using Lotus script and formula logic. There's all the attributes of document data in there. There's access control, so there's users that can see certain things depending on the roles that have been assigned to them in the ACL, and in terms of hide when logic, those types of things. Typically, there's rich text and attachments associated with that. And then there's the user interface itself that can be quite rich, if you will, particularly if the notes client is the front end to these applications. So you have different migration options out there that you look at when you look at all of your notes applications. But and these kind of list those that you go through when you inventory your applications. But typically with the complex ones, you're really, if they're a living application, one that you're maintaining and extending and it's of value to the business, the two options for the Quadrant 4 out of this list of bullets are the rewrite or the migration with some kind of automated tool like what we're going to show you today. So the solution we're going to show you today, the Composer Portfolio, is an automated tool that will migrate the entire notes application that you would put through the tool into a Microsoft .NET platform. And so the solution actually has the ability to migrate over all the primary or 5 components, I will say, of a notes application. So this would be, and you see these 5 components in the graphic in front of you. There's the notes database itself, which is a flat file structure. There's the document data. There's the business logic, that formula script, and then the Lotus script. There's the user interface, and then the security. All of that is part of a Quadrant 4 application and needs to be, if you're going to take that application in Notes and move it over or off of Notes into a .NET platform, you need to address all of those in a migration. This Composer solution you see does that, and it maps it over into the graphic on the left-hand side. These are the .NET layers in the, or I guess in the .NET stack. These are the technologies that it's moving it into. So it is an ASP.NET application, so it's a browser-based application. It can be maintained and extended in Visual Studio because it is all C# code. It's a pure .NET application that you're getting that's generated by the tool. And then the security is typically Active Directory in .NET, although we have some customers that are using LDAP, an LDAP security provider, which can be done. And then your choice for relational database, we show SQL Server here, but we do have some customers that are using Oracle as well. And of course, in the .NET platform, you are running on the Windows Server stack. Now, a couple of things just to spend a moment on this graphic here to note is that, first of all, this is an ASP.NET application. We often get asked by customers if this will convert the application into SharePoint. And the answer to that is no. We specifically focus on generating ASP.NET applications, and there's a very good reason for that, and that is that the complex notes applications cannot be recreated. All the functionality cannot be recreated within SharePoint. And in some cases, there's some of the functionality that can, but it would require a lot of manual effort and jumping through hoops to even get it somewhat similar over into SharePoint. And our migrations are all about a like-for-like migration because our customers are looking for a very low-risk approach to doing these migrations. And when you have, especially when you have a lot of end users that use these applications, you want a like-for-like because this minimizes your costs for having to retrain your users on a different application that doesn't work or navigate exactly the same. And then also, just from a testing perspective, when you do a migration, if you have a like-for-like, you can use the same testing scripts that you used when you were maintaining the Lotus Notes application. And this really speeds up and lowers the risk of the move off of the application, moving it off of Notes into the .NET platform. The other thing we often get asked about the Notes database migration, because the Notes database is a flat file, in moving it to SQL Server or Oracle, that's a relational database, there is some level of normalization done. It's not a full normalization, but there is some normalization done, so it's not just taking the flat file and putting it into one column in the relational database. And we can go into that in more detail if there's questions about that after the demo. Now, this graphic here, we just wanted to spend a moment on the methodology for the migration. And probably, this is a very busy slide, but the key message to take away from here, or the few key messages, one is that there is a proven process for successful migration. This solution has been out there for over 5 years, and we've done a lot of successful migrations, and we have some customers that actually work with the tool themselves. And so there is a proven process for migrating them. And basically, it starts with putting the application through an analyzer. We have an analyzer that's in the tool so that you can actually, and it'll generate output that will let us actually look at, okay, how much effort is this really going to take? And it'll flag things that won't be automatically migrated for you. And there's a reason for that. There are some things that shouldn't be migrated automatically because you're moving from a Notes client-server architecture into a .NET browser-based into your architecture. There's some things you should make some decisions on, and then there are some things that there's just not a one-to-one correspondence for Notes over into the .NET environment. But the analyzer flags all of that, and we have documentation on best practices for addressing those. But it gives you a clear idea before the project even begins of where is there some post-migration work that would need to be done and what's the level of effort and resources needed. And then once the analysis is done, you go through the actual putting the NSFs through the converter, and you go through the conversion. And then there is, after that, there's some cleanup and compiling errors to resolve, just because the compiler in Notes is much less strict, if you will, than the .NET compiler. So there are some things that get flagged for that you address. And in the case of when we would do the migration, we would look at getting it to compile and do some basic unit testing. And then after that, you would address any of those post-migration things that are flagged by the analyzer to finish out the app. And then you would do the final testing and QA and deployment. Those are the basic steps in the migration process. And then there are various tools as part of this Composer product to help through those various stages. I mentioned the analyzer. There's the converter itself. There's also some utilities to help with the mapping of the security from ACL over into Active Directory. In particular, there's ones for doing a names resolver, because a lot of times the security roles that you use in ACL, there's corresponding security roles over in Active Directory, but it's not the exact same name or naming convention. So we've offered some tools to really streamline and automate that whole process. But the end result is that you do get a .NET application. The other key point I would take away from this is we offer 2 options with this solution. As I mentioned, the solution's been out there for 5 years, and originally when we did this, we just offered it as a service. And we do still offer that, where we will convert the applications for the customer, and we do that as a fixed price project typically, and we're able to do that because of that analyzer. We will run the NSFs through the analyzer, and with that we're able to come back with with a fixed price estimate for you that lets you know, okay, this is what it's going to cost. And then we can, based on availability and available resources and scheduling, we can come back to you with, here's how long we think it'll take for us to deliver it. But the other option is, because the product has been available for over 5 years and used in a lot of projects, we've productized this tool and we license it to customers who want to do the migration themselves. Because the technology has matured over the years, and then we've put a lot of documentation around it as well as training. So you can actually go through a 3.5-day training course on how to use the tool, including this migration methodology and using the analyzer all the way through to getting the application in production. We can put you through 3.5 days of training of how to do that with this tool. And that can be done on site at the customer site or at our headquarters here in Roseville, California. And then you can actually license the tool and do the migration yourself. And when you do that, in both of these cases, you get the conversion tool to do the conversion, but you also get all of the source code of the generated application. So once you're done with the conversion, you have the source code of the converted app to maintain and extend on your own. There's no dependency on the tool once you've completed the conversion. Just in terms of the platform support that is for this solution we're about ready to demo to you, this runs in the .NET platform, and because it came out 5 years ago, we still support the .NET 2.0 framework, but it is on 3.5, and we will be supporting the 4.0 framework. We support SQL Server 2005 and 2008, and this runs on the Internet Explorer browser. This works for Visual Studio in terms of when once you have the converted app to maintain and extend and clean it up, it works with Visual Studio 2008 or 2010. And then obviously the various Windows platforms that it's working on. Now, we're going to go ahead and go into the demo, but some things I want you to keep in mind for the demo is this is an ASP.NET solution running in a browser, but I mentioned that because when you look at it, it is a like-for-like migration. And so it's going to look very similar to the Notes app, but it's running in a browser. And I mentioned the reasons we do that for the customer, just to reduce their costs of retraining end users and minimize the risk involved in testing an app with, that is a like-for-like. You can use the same testing scripts. It will convert over all, and so as a result, it's converting over the user interface. This will convert over all of the business logic, the security, and the document data. Suresh will show you that. I mentioned a couple of tools in the Composer portfolio. We're going to focus on the converter itself, but if you have some questions about some of the other utilities that I mentioned, like the ACL Manager, the Names Resolver, I didn't really go into the data pump, but that's a utility that just helps with the moving of the data and doing some things there. Suresh can go into that with the time that's allotted. We may have to do some follow-up for you on that. But it will be a Notes app. We'll show you the Notes app a little bit, and then we'll show you what the migrated app looks like, and we'll actually open up some of that migrated app in Visual Studio so we can look at some of the converted code and you can see what that looks like. Now, I've mentioned Suresh a few times, and so I want to introduce him at this point. Suresh is our Vice President of Technical Services for our Composer practice. So he owns the technical services that do the training, the migration specialists that do these migrations when it's done as a service by us, as well as the guys that support this for, when folks are using the tool and going, the technical support resources as well. And he's also over our archiving technical services as well, and on the archiving side of the business. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Suresh for the demo, and I just need to make him the presenter and also make sure that he is not muted. Suresh, if you're there, can you let me know you're not muted?
I can hear you there. Thanks, Matt.
Excellent. Okay. Now I'm just going to change your role to presenter here, and then when that happens,
sure.
You guys should see the screen change as he brings up his screen for the demo.
Okay. So let me just go ahead and share my desktop here, and we should get going with the demonstration. So I'm pretty sure you should be able to see my screen there, Matt.
Yes.
Okay. So from a demonstration standpoint, what I'll be showcasing today is the technology that Matt was talking about that will help you migrate Lotus Notes applications to the ASP.NET platform. So before I actually get into Visual Studio and show you the actual solution, I just wanted to touch upon a typical custom Lotus Notes application that you're seeing on the screen here. So from a end user developer standpoint, this is your typical custom notes application where there's a lot of navigation that allows end users to navigate through the application, looking at data. There's a whole bunch of views. The views actually dictating how data is actually displayed to the end users, or data is filtered for the end users to view. There is this whole concept of categorized views with various sort of summaries that you're seeing on the screen here. Then there is also ways to actually get to the actual documents itself. So here is an example of how a form UI within this particular sample app that we're going to migrate looks like. It has got your typical notes sections. It's got the whole tabbed approach for segregating data within this particular UI. There is a whole bunch of data fields in here with either radio buttons or drop downs and things like that. Then there's also the whole concept of action buttons, allowing users to interact with the document itself, so that when you're working with a Lotus Notes application or a document, you can actually perform workflow actions where certain either manual agents or code, Lotus script or formula is actually triggered based on clicks and routing and email forwarding and things like that. So from a notes application standpoint, custom applications is what we typically focus on, because like Matt had mentioned, all your existing template-based Nifty 50 apps, your document libraries, discussion room databases, team room databases and things like that, all those can actually have a landing spot on the SharePoint environment in the Microsoft stack. So what we are focusing here is on typical custom applications that allow end users to work on business critical applications or functionality that is required for managing enterprise businesses. So now let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and close this particular application here and go into Visual Studio. And before I start the migration, one of the key requirements is to actually have a repository for when we run this through the migrator to actually store the data that's coming off this particular database that we are going to migrate. So we have support for SQL Server and Oracle. but the preference is typically SQL Server because we have full text indexing support on SQL Server currently. So since Lotus Notes applications allow end users to search through the data and have all those filtering options and things like that, we actually have a Lotus Notes repository within SQL Server as part of this particular demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new database here as a sample for this repository store. Going to call it webinar, and click OK, and it's got no tables in here. So once I go through the migration, I will come back in here and explain to you the various rules that we follow in actually creating tables, and some of the normalization process that we go through for the actual conversion of these tables and columns and things like that. So when you install this particular software, what you're getting is a Visual Studio template. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new website. So by default we create a ASP.NET website for the solution that is actually generated. So the software will actually install a template for you in My Templates, and it's actually a Visual C# template. And I'm going to click OK. And what this is going to bring up is a wizard interface for you to go through and select certain options for migration that will help you define what the solution needs to be. So in this case, I'm going to touch upon a couple of items in here. So we do support importing data as part of this initial conversion process. So you can actually see, you can either import data completely, or you can actually import just 100 records to begin with. So typically, if you're looking at a huge database that has a number of documents in them, and you just want a snapshot of the records as part of your developer tests, then in that case you would just click on, just import the first 100 records for every table that is being created. You have the option to actually check all the documents to find out missing fields. This is critical in the sense that if you're actually having data as part of this first step where you're importing and creating a solution, Composer allows or scans through all the document data and identifies fields that have been either removed or modified as part of the document design over the years, and it actually keeps track of all that stuff and then creates necessary columns needed to store all that data. So as part of this data migration, we don't lose any data that is part of your old legacy data as well, which had old design elements to begin with. We actually support localization. So if there are foreign language interfaces that you need to build, we actually support localization of messages and things like that as part of our solution as well. We actually, as some or all of you know, with regards to Lotus Notes, there's this whole concept of multi-valued fields within forms. So we actually provide a way to actually split the values out into what we call a composer values table. So you have the option to either normalize the data for that particular type of fields as part of the initial import or not. And then you also have this whole concept of the whole master page in ASP.NET. So if you want to have a common design across forms and things like that, typically if you're using frame sets and navigators as part of your solution, then you would this would be very useful. So I'm going to choose the default options in here and go to the next screen. So like Matt had mentioned, we do have support for SQL and Oracle, but in this case, for this particular demonstration, I'm going to be using SQL. So there are options in here for you to select the particular server and the database that you are going to connect to create the repository. So since I created a new database called Webinar, I'm just going to test the connection here. And what that's going to enable me to do is finish this particular import of the NSF into an ASP.NET solution. So I'm just going to click Finish here and wait for this particular application to be imported. So during this process, at the bottom left-hand corner here, you can actually see, it's actually going through the various steps. We actually use the DHL output for any specific database that we are importing to actually identify the various design elements and all the other attributes that's tied to Lotus Notes databases. So as part of this import, what it is doing is it's actually not only converting your typical user interface into ASP.NET ASPX pages, but it's also converting all your business logic, which is either in Formula or a Lotus script to C#. It is creating the appropriate classes for all that business logic for the form design elements. It is also converting your ACL, which is typical of any notes database. So if I go ahead and so once it finishes importing here, I'll actually show you what the ACL looked on the sample notes database I showed and how it gets converted in here. So we convert the user interface, we convert the security, the business logic, and all of the data that is part of the specific NSF that you're migrating. We also do have support as part of the import options to, if developers use the whole concept of design templates within Notes, we do have that same concept here as well for, importing and having templates provide design elements for applications that are derived from those templates and similar to those. So what you're seeing on the screen at this point is it's gone through the entire process of creating the ASP.NET website solution for you, and it has created a whole bunch of to-dos or comments within the code. So what this means is that there were certain pieces of the code that we expect the developer to review after the automatic migration. So this is that whole third phase within the whole phased approach to migrations where developers are supposed to be reviewing all these to-dos and addressing them. And these to-dos are typically items that we cannot automatically convert due to the nature of the specific to-dos themselves or the specific functionality that it actually is providing. Typical samples would be where you would have JavaScript, so Java, and some of the things that we automatically don't convert that will be tagged as a to-do for the developer to review. So let me go ahead and click on a sample of a to-do here. So you can actually see a bunch of to-dos in here where you're actually seeing certain Lotus script code is not converted. Here is a JavaScript event section that is not translated because we have our own JavaScript framework as part of our solution. So if an application is web-enabled where it has a lot of JavaScript and HTML and pass-through HTML and things like that, we do not convert any of those automatically. So that will be kind of a manual process for you to identify, if there was any specific functionality within those web-enabled objects that will need to be manually integrated into our web framework here. Let's review one of this particular to-do here. So what you're seeing here is there's a dialog box entry. What we are trying to tell the developer is we provide enough notes in here for the to-dos so that allowing the developers who are transitioning to managing these applications in the ASP.NET world to do what is needed to make sure that the dialog box syntaxes after conversion are right and are meeting the requirements of the functionality that it provided before. So let me go ahead and touch upon some of the structure of the generated application here. So like in Notes, that the NSF is where all the various design objects are, and all the business logic, everything for a specific form is part of this form design typically. So what we have done is we have kind of separated out all that in terms of the user interface and the business logic. So the user interfaces are all converted to ASPX forms within the solution, and the business logic is actually converted into all these various folders where you have the actual code, the C# code behind each of the design that is actually being converted to the solution, for the solution. So as an example, on this particular form, what you're seeing on the screen is, you actually have a class structure that actually is nothing but the document definition of how the data is laid out for this particular form. There are various attributes and design, attributes that is actually tied to the class structure. So this is basically what is actually stored in memory for a document for this particular form. And then there is also the manager class that is actually the the business logic and database access code for this particular form. So we have support for all the computed values, all your hides when, all your existing @functions. So you will also notice that when you look at these particular converted code, we actually retain all the names and variable names and also function names and code event names as part of the conversion. So it's very easy for you to look back into the converted code for identifying what it was before and what it is later in terms of the actual code convert. So like I said, we actually have a framework that actually supports all the existing @functions for notes. So as and since we have been doing this for a number of years, as we encounter new ones that we do not support, we actually provide support for those as well. So what else? So if you look at the actual form UI itself, let me just go ahead and open up one of this particular ASPX page. So these are typical, standard support for the coding standards for ASP markup on HTML. We also have certain unified controls that we provide as part of our solution to get you a very like-for-like experience for what is needed from an end user standpoint, so that they don't have to go through a whole bunch of retraining on using these particular applications. So from a code structure standpoint, you can actually see all the business logic under the app code directory here. So just like in Notes, we have sections for actions. These are your shared actions. You have your agents. We have full support for conversion of agents. So once these agents are converted, they actually are scheduled as Windows services in the new environment for them to run and perform, a scheduled agent functionality. Then you have your forms, you have your libraries. If there are any services, we have support for exposing all the existing view functionality and form functionality as web services. So if you would like to integrate with external systems, or you would like for the external systems to consume data from the applications that you have converted, you can actually use these web services. Then you have support for subforms, your views, and also, like I had mentioned, there's this whole support for the security itself that is actually converted. So I'll touch upon also the ACL Manager tool, which is actually used to manage this particular XML as part of the maintenance, ongoing maintenance for these converted applications. So like you can see, the actual, so let me just bring up the training database again, and bring up the access control for this particular database. So like you can see, there are a few groups that have been granted access to this particular database with certain attributes of functionality based on the access type that they have been provided. Then there's a whole bunch of application roles as well. So the way we deal with that is, we actually create an XML for all the custom application roles within this particular database, and then the membership for each of these roles are defined by the specific references that's coming in from the ACL. So all your attributes related to the access type and things like that are also defined as part of this XML, and then this is what is actually used to provide the security context for the users as they log in based on whatever your default security provider is, either Active Directory or any LDAP provider or directory services in the new environment. We do have support for all your readers and authors fields as well, and as I touched upon the database, once I bring up this application in .NET, I'll also touch upon some of those attributes on readers and authors fields. So let's go ahead and compile this particular application now. So like typically what would happen is a .NET developer would actually go through the compile process for these applications. So as for this particular application, there is one specific compiler error that you're seeing here, because there's an ambiguous reference to this particular name, because there's also a enum that's actually defined within this particular form for this particular name. So I'm just going to qualify this with the full name, and going to go ahead and save this and build the website. And depending on the complexity of the app, the compile process can be a little bit time consuming due to the fact that ASP.NET is not as forgiving, and C# is not very forgiving, and it's a very strongly typed programming language, and Lotus Notes is because it automatically figures out what the developer was expecting to do or wanting to do as part of the code that's being written. So at this point, we have a compiled application, and we are going to go ahead and run this from within Visual Studio that a typical developer would actually undertake. And it's actually going to bring up this particular application on IE. So our current support for browsers is Internet Explorer. And here's the converted app. So like you can see, it gets you, and typical, depending on the complexity of the apps that you're converting, you can get a very high percentage of code convert automatically, as part of the automated piece of the migration phase. If not, you'll have to go through the to-dos to address what is not migrated. And once you get the application to compile, you should be able to see, all the application with the data that was actually converted. So you can actually see it brings up all the outlines that was in the original application. It actually has support for all your categorized views, so it has support for categorized views, flat views, hierarchical views, all those kind of user interfaces on the views for end users. So let me just go ahead and bring all the entries in here, click on one of the entries, just like notes. So the user interface is very similar to how you would use the application within Notes. So double click to get to a form, and then by default the forms are opened up in read-only mode. So double clicking on these particular forms will open it in edit mode. Like you're seeing here. We have support for rich text fields. So this is very important to note because a lot of these custom applications have rich text fields where there's a lot of attachments that's actually embedded within this particular rich text field. So we bring over the attachments. We also provide you a way to actually going forward, use this control to actually attach documents in the new database transactions that are created as part of this user interface. So you can actually see, it does a pretty good job in actually retaining the existing user interface for these applications, and all the existing data is actually converted. All your existing action menus are retained for you to test this within your particular environment from a developer standpoint. So here is an example of already existing prompts that are actually showing up from within the business logic that this particular application is showing. So all your existing UI design elements. So here's an example of how you would all the drop downs, lookup values, all the business logic for abstraction is all converted. So here's a prompt that's allowing you to enter stuff. So like you see, I didn't do anything much in terms of what I needed to do to get to the state of user interface and application functionality just out of the box. So like I said, depending on the complexity of the apps, you can get to the state very quickly using our tool, and then finish the migration with finishing up the to-dos and managing the QA portion of it, and making sure that the existing functionality is retained as part of the migrated app. So all your existing workflow stuff is actually converted. So here's the entry that I just created for, and you can actually see, all your existing audit stuff, as part of the business logic is all carried over as part of the migration. Okay. So so that's just a quick overview of what our tool does in terms of migration of Lotus Notes applications, custom Lotus Notes applications. So if you look at the actual database itself, and if I open up the webinar database here, you can actually see there's a whole bunch of tables that we create based on certain rules for this migration. So the typical rules that we follow are that every form within a specific Lotus Notes database is converted into a table, and the table columns are determined based on either UI elements or code constructs that actually generate fields to the document data on the fly. So we support all that. And then if you're actually looking at the specific columns itself, you can actually see we have certain columns that we create by default for supporting the readers and authors fields. So that way, like all the existing security can be provided as is, because Lotus Notes provides a very robust security framework for how document data and design data is all accessed by end users. So we have support for all those granular component level security from a Heisman standpoint, and also row level security based on readers and authors fields and stuff. We also have certain system tables that we create as part of this migration, and one of them is what I would always touch upon is this whole composer attachments table. So what this table does is it actually holds all your existing attachments from the rich text fields. So all your existing blob data is separated out from your existing data structures, so you could actually get to the binary data directly if you need to, based on the notes ID or the field name or the attachment name. So all the existing rich text field is converted to HTML. So on the fly, we have our Composer runtime, for which you get the sources for the runtime as well as part of the solution buy. It actually puts together all the rich text fields depending on the positioning of the specific attachments within the rich text field and stuff. So so that's just a very quick overview of the database design itself. So we actually utilize the Notes ID as the primary key for most of the data and hierarchical information store for this particular data. So the Notes ID is what is actually used for bringing uniqueness to the actual records themselves for the data that is actually migrated. So you could actually, once the conversion of data is done, get an analysis on what the data count was before and what it was next for making sure that all the data is actually migrated as part of this conversion. Matt was referring to the data importer. So data importer is actually a tool that we provide, allowing developers to import data into the repositories that you create as part of this initial automated migration step. And this allows you to select databases that you would like to import data from. And provide filtering options of what specific data, or if you would like to bring in data only after a specific create date of the records, you could actually do that, and specify a repository name where you would like to get this particular data into. So in this case, like let me say if I need to get it into the schema database that I created. I also have the option to recreate my full text indexes at this point, so that if you want to refresh your indexes before the end users get into a UAT situation or a production cutover situation, then you can actually do that, and then you could actually schedule this particular task within this data importer. So you could have multiple databases that you have considered for migration, all queued up for execution by the data importer, and then you could execute all of them one after the other in sequence, or you could execute one of the many items that you have queued up as part of this particular process. And there are, if we do identify a change in column widths and data types, not the data types actually, the actual column widths of the specific columns that we created in the tables as part of the data that we are importing. We actually provide recommendations on the differences of what it was set up as part of the import process in terms of the structure, and then what it was actually identified as part of the data import. So that way, like DBAs could change the structure accordingly.
All right.
And Matt, I think we are coming up close to the hour here, so I will let you spend some time on some questions that we are seeing.
Great. So yeah, what we'll do now is, well, thank you very much, Suresh. As you guys can see, a very comprehensive solution. What we'll do now is open it up for questions, and we'll go silent for a second here, just to let you post your questions, and so we can start reading through them. And again, if you can, post them using the Q&A button, and we'll go from there. We'll come back on in just 1 minute to start going through the questions. All right, we'll go ahead and start going through the questions. The first one, any plans to be able to move to Azure?
At this point, we don't have any plans to move to Azure.
All right, next question. Is this strictly a Notes client application to .NET browser-based application tool? Well, I would say the answer to that is yes. It's really for migrating your Notes client apps to .NET. If there's a specific scenario other than that you're looking for, let us know. But that's really what it's geared for, and that's really the best target for your complex Notes apps to go to. Next question. It works with Internet Explorer. Is there a dependency on Internet Explorer? In other words, are other browsers not supported?
There's no dependency on IE. What we have over the years been testing on as IE, so it's more of a test cycle on other browsers to see if there's any, and we do utilize some AJAX components that will have to be upgraded to support other browsers at this point.
Okay. Next question. The business logic conversion is something I have not seen from other vendors. How long have you had that? Well, we've had that since the beginning of it. It's been out for over 5 years. And yes, I would say that is one of the distinctions of the product. The other thing you'll notice in that business logic conversion, I mentioned the like for like and how it minimizes the impact to the end users and to the testing. But there's also a like for like, as Suresh showed in the demo, for the developers as well, in terms of just how when you bring it up in Visual Studio, the organization of all the folders, the naming conventions, and all of that. You can see that there is a like for like there as well that I think really helps the developers in transitioning in the migration. Next question, how do you license the tool? Is it per Lotus Notes application? Yes, the tool, if you are going to license the tool, it is priced per NSF to be converted. Next question, how about complex web-based domino application to .NET? I think this might be a follow-on to that earlier question about, is this just for a Lotus Notes client app to .NET?
Yeah, so if you have a version of this particular application that is client-based and where you can bring in a lot of functionality from that, then you could utilize our tool to do that, and then review what's been web-enabled to see if we out of the box provide some of that functionality, or specifically for field validations or your navigation schemes and things like that, or if this is a Notes 8 application, that's something that you need to be all aware of, is also that at this time we don't have support for any Notes 8 design elements. As an example, if you have applications that are used that are built using Ets pages, or some of your application themes and things like that in the Notes 8 environment, we don't have support for migration of those.
Right, and what we've seen so far though is typically the customer projects that have done this where they're at Notes 8, typically the apps that they're looking to migrate have been out there for quite a bit longer, and all they've done is upgrade them up to 8, and we haven't seen many of the new elements from Notes 8 or X pages or any of that integrated into those apps, and so there really hasn't been much issue. But you do need to be aware of those things if you have Notes 8 applications you want to migrate and has some of those new elements in them. The other thing is, if you've already kind of web-enabled your app as a Domino app, so a lot of times we see those will have a lot of JavaScript in them or Java already, and those are things that would have to be redone. They wouldn't be automatically migrated. But as Suresh mentioned, a lot of times there's a Notes client version of the app out there, and that's what they end up using. And as you can see, a lot of the web, from there with this product, you get a web-based application that has all that web-based functionality. All right, next question. Can I get a copy of the presentation? The answer to that is yes. In fact, we've recorded this presentation and demo, and so by later this week we'll have the recording available for you, so you can review the presentation and demo and the Q&A session as well, and that'll be available for you, as well as you can always follow up with your Unify representative to get the details. Next question, is there an evaluation license available? The short answer to that is no, there is not, because you get all the source code as part of the generated application. We don't provide the eval license. Plus, if you haven't been trained on the tool, that's not exactly a recipe for success or a good use of your time. But what we do find, though, is that for a lot of companies, their decision process involves looking at some of their own code converted with this to see, is this something they can maintain and extend. And so what we do offer is two options there. Once we have some conversations with you and qualify what you're trying to do, and if you're really trying to move forward on a project or a decision, we have a sample code conversion where we'll take one of your NSFs and we'll spend 1 day at no charge converting the code, and then we can go over that with you in a WebEx and provide you that converted code so that you can see, what it would be like to maintain and extend in Visual Studio. Other folks, though, they actually need to see one of their NSFs converted and running, and that's a proof of concept. We do that as well. We would run it through the analyzer and give you an estimate of how long it would take to get that converted and up and running, or at least the functionality you need to see up and running for your decision process, and then, we would charge accordingly. Typically, proof of concept, we typically see those in the $10,000 range for customers based on the scope and what they're wanting to do. And, we try and work with you on a scope that's within a 2-week period, because obviously we don't want to spend all of our time, and neither do you, just on a proof of concept. All right, I don't see any other questions, so I think what we'll do is we'll wrap this up. Again, I hope some of the takeaways to take from this is that you have a large spectrum of applications that if you're looking to move away from notes, that you need to determine what to do with. For the complex ones that you need to maintain and extend, there's a solution for the .NET platform here for doing a like-for-like. And that like-for-like is both for the end users as well as the developers, as you saw, and it's a complete solution for migrating the notes application over, including the business logic and the data, as well as the security and user interface. When you exit out of here, there will be a little 3-question or 4-question survey. Please fill that out for Suresh and I. Let us know if this is what you expected, if there's additional information you wanted to see or need at this point, and if there's specific topics you'd like to see covered in future webinars, let us know as well. We drive those from those survey responses. And again, we'll have a recorded version of this available within a few days on the website, and we'll have a Unify representative follow up with you to see if there's anything else you need. Thanks, and have a great day.